Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please give us a few minutes as participants are still coming in. Thank you. The participants are still coming in. Shall we give it another minute before we start? Yeah, okay. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second theme for the Just series, specifically on the application of CCPT for insurance and takaful operators. Just a couple of announcements before we start. As this is a webinar style event, kindly use the Q&A box at the bottom right of your screen for questions that you may have. Please note that the Q&A will be addressed at the end of the session. This session will be recorded, and the recordings as well as the slides will be made available after our event. At the end of the session, there will be a short survey. Appreciate if you could take the time to answer these questions to facilitate future learning initiatives. Without further ado, I'll pass this session to Encik Junaid. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. And good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to session 3 of the Just series, theme 2, which is implementation and application of the CCPT. By way of introduction, my name is Junaid. I think if we can go to the next slide, please. Yes. So by background, I'm a qualified actuary. My previous role was in risk management, and I'm currently Director Sustainability for AIA Berhad. Joining me in today's session will be Oi Cheng, similar to earlier sessions held this morning. She has over 30 years of experience in sustainability consulting and has successfully led public listed companies in Malaysia, Thailand, and Australia in achieving leadership positions in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. Oi Cheng, would you like to say hello? Okay.
Apologies, I was on mute. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've all had a nice lunch and a good break from yesterday's public holiday. Welcome to today's session. Over to you, Junaid.
Thanks, Oicheng. So in this section, we'll talk about the application of CCPT, as Shirley mentioned, for insurance and takaful operators. Of course, here I'm representing the CCPT implementation group, where AIA and Maybank are co-leads, and CIMB is serving as the secretariat. You can also join the CCPT implementation group by sending an email to ccptig@bnm.gov.my. At some point, I'll paste this email address in the chat as well. Okay.
Actually, Junaid, sorry to interrupt. It is pasted at the end of the slide, so
okay,
you can, participants can get it then.
Okay, great. Thanks, Oicheng. Okay, so as you might have heard in the earlier sessions today, for those of you who attended, the taxonomy gives us a homogeneous approach or a common language that FIs can speak when it comes to climate change. So Oicheng and I will cover a summary of CCPT implementation, followed by case studies on the implementation, and concluding with a Q&A session. During the course of the presentation, at any point, please feel free to park your questions in the chat group below. Now, before we begin, maybe just to lay the context, as you may have heard, even from the earlier session this morning, climate change is one of the biggest issues that's facing humanity, and that may adversely impact us, and not only us, but our future generations as well. Perhaps I can also take this opportunity to do a small sharing on the recent Ipcc findings that were published in 2021. So the Ipcc, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is actually a group that comprises of about 234 scientists from 66 countries, who basically comb through tons of research, and what I understand, it's over 14,000 research papers over 5 years for this particular set of findings. Their unsurprising conclusion from these, from combing through all this research, is that humans have definitely been causing climate change. Further, what they've pointed out is that cutting back from emissions will not stop us from a 1.5 degree centigrade rise. Just to let you know, we are actually at 1.1 degrees compared to pre-industrial levels, the period of which refers to about the 1850s or the 1900s. The reason we look at pre-industrial levels is that, firstly, industrialization caused a very large change in emissions, and also because this is when we actually started keeping formalized climate change records. It's also, incidentally, the first time that we started noticing climate change, and there's a research paper that dates back all the way to 1856, where a scientist named Eunice actually published a paper linking emissions to climate change. So these findings show that the 1.5 degree centigrade breach will happen by 2040. But there is a bright side to this. So the good news is that if we switch to net zero, for example, there can be a reduction of 0.1 degree by the end of the century to 1.4 degrees centigrade. The report also mentions increased hurricanes, wildfires, droughts, fire, weather, and generally more frequent and severe weather events, some of which you may have actually started seeing in Malaysia as well. You may also have heard, very recently, just this past week, that the new capital of Indonesia has been named Nusantara and replaces Jakarta, which is notoriously congested, suffers regular flooding, and is one of the fastest sinking cities in the world due to the extraction of groundwater. So under any scenario besides the net zero scenario, the 2 degrees centigrade Paris Agreement target will be breached by 2060, according to this report. So you might be asking, why have I gone through this lengthy set of Ipcc findings? The reason for sharing this is that as FIs, there is a huge onus upon us to direct our economic activities and cash flows towards causes that are not harmful to the environment, so that we can contribute towards having, a greener future, which is not as warm as science is predicting. Okay, so if we can please go to the next slide, Oicheng. Okay, so the presentation will delve into both the insurance value chain seen on the screen, as well as the investment value chain. The insurance value chain, of course, represents areas such as product development, underwriting, claims, assets, liabilities, and capital management, and finally reinsurance as well. Similarly, the investment value chain begins with objective setting, sourcing and selection of investments, and all the way up to monitoring and reviewing. So I'll pass to Oicheng to take you through how the guiding principles in the CCPT can be embedded into each of these areas, and we'll begin with guiding principle 1 and 2. So over to you, Oicheng.
Thanks, Junaid. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, welcome back for those of you who was with us from this morning, and for those of you who just joined us, welcome to the afternoon session on the Just Series JC3 Upskilling Sustainability Training. So today we're talking about CCPT implementation, and today's session, this afternoon session, is specifically focused, as Junaid has said, on insurance companies and Takafu operators. So what we're talking about here is the transactional evaluation for GP1, Guiding Principle 1 and Guiding Principle 2. And Guiding Principle 1, as we have gone through this morning, is talking about climate change mitigation, whereas Guiding Principle 2 is with regards to climate change adaptation. And we actually went through, what we mean by mitigation and adaptation, as well as the subcategories that goes into it. So basically, for insurance companies and insurance Takafu organizations that is seeking to implement or who have already embarked on implementing with regards to GP1 and GP2, the first step is basically to embed the criteria just need to make this more accessible, criteria into which financing or investment assessments are to be made. So for a lot of insurance companies, we don't talk about financing. We talk about basically the sales of your goods, of your service, your insurance product that you have, whether we're talking about life insurance or we're talking about general insurance. And then we need to evaluate whether the transaction that you are, the organization that is undergoing with regards to the product that you're selling, been undertaken by a corporation or by a certain activity that is being undertaken needs to be evaluated, whether it is part of climate mitigation or whether the people, let's say, for example, you're insuring, are involved in solar panel installation, solar panel mitigation for life insurance, and for general insurance, whether general insurance is with regards to the equipment that they have, and with regards to their fire risk and all of that, whether that type of activity is being undertaken in that regard for general insurance. So that needs to be evaluated. At the same time, from an investment perspective, looking at the various products that you are investing in, and looking at also the various products that your fund managers are investing in as well. And that needs to be set with regards to the criteria on whether the activity that you're investing in is on climate mitigation or climate adaptation in that sense. When we talk about climate mitigation, is that whether you're avoiding or the activity is avoiding, or the transaction in which you are investing in is going to be focused on avoiding climate change, greenhouse gas emissions. So investment into solar panel, renewable energy plants, renewable energy producers, solar panel producers, and things like that. Whereas in terms of adaptation, whether you help in improving resilience is where the plants come in, where solar panel plants come in. So this is the criteria that you need to consider for the insurance and Takafu, so Takafu insurance products operators, and then the investment side of things as well. The only difference is where Takafu operations, you need to consider the Islamic Sharia principles of it, that is being applied to the product and to the investments that you make. Then second part is you need to set up consider setting up detailed guidelines or criteria for front office. Basically, you need to be able to set up criteria to evaluate for GP1 and GP2 whether the company that you're dealing with is involved in what type of activity, what is the threshold, how do you evaluate. And earlier this morning we've already we've already provided examples of the various sectors and the various activities that they could be involved in, which could be classified in GP1 and GP2. So this one, the information that we provided this morning can be used as a tool to help you guide the various guidelines that with regards to the criteria for the implementation or the investment or the sales of the product that you have. The other thing is also what you need to consider is what you need to brief your agents about with regards to the products and the approach that you want to take on the implementation of GP1 and GP2, because the insurance sector is very much dependent upon agents to sell your products and all, whether you're doing it on a personal basis or whether you're doing on a corporate basis. So where GP1 and GP2 primarily comes into consideration is when you deal on a corporate basis more than on a personal basis in this case. And this one applies for the life insurance and also the general insurance products, as well as the Takafu products that you have. So similarly, when we talk about set of criteria and all, you do need to sit down with your fund managers, who will also be undergoing this process to reach an alignment as to what is GP1 and GP2 in terms of the various transactions that you're going to make in this regard relating to investment. So after you've established that, we look in terms of approach 3, which is to establish an ideal and consistent method for assessing economic activities by collaborating among the FIs. So one of the things that we had discussed this morning and also with the banking section as well is whether standardization or whether discussion needs to happen within the financial sector on the various criteria that needs to be set up in place. Because one of the things that was brought up was the fact that different banks and different entities have been asking different depth of questions and different types of questions, right? And so given the fact that the economic pool in Malaysia is limited, we're not such a big country. So what basically could happen is that one target customer, which can buy products from many different banks and different insurance companies, can receive many types of questionnaires from these financial institutions, asking different levels of questions. So one of the things that was discussed, and perhaps Junaid can add on later, is to talk about standardization or maybe having a base minimum with regards to the methodology for assessing economic activities. So I think this is something that we've talked about this morning, and this is something that probably engagement with the committee does need to happen. Junaid, you got anything to add here?
No, I agree, and that's what the CCPT implementation group is doing as well. So where there's a need for consensus across the industry, that's the main thing that the CCPT IG is trying to address. Yeah.
So thanks, Junaid. So then we go into approach 4, where we do need to be able to ascertain and to obtain robust data and quantifiable data. And hence for the banking sector, there's been a lot of questionnaires sent out asking from the target companies or their customers with regards to their carbon footprint, with regards to the quantification of their carbon footprint, and also any plans that they might have with regards to transitioning from the current carbon position to maybe a lower carbon position, or to be more specific, asking for their transition plan from where they are to a net zero position. So we've discussed this also at length, and even before that, industry that the clients that we've engaged with and feedback from other companies as well that we've been talking to has brought up the fact that data, verifiable data, and how do you say, robustness of data is a problem. And added to the fact that SMEs, medium-sized companies and all have, from the ones that I've been talking to anyway, have basically fed back to say that they actually don't understand why you need the data for. So getting data and setting up necessary outreach programs and information gathering and all, which is related back to approach number 3. I think this is something that the whole industry can do. We are all suffering from you know, if we want to do modeling, if we want to do, in this case, underwriting or even understanding what the risk of your products is with regards to pricing mechanism and all, having a lack of data and not understanding where your customers are with regards to their carbon position, and also based on what we've discussed this morning, you know, looking at carbon does not mean just looking at carbon footprint, or looking at climate does not mean just looking at the carbon footprint. There are associated social and community programs that come in place, that impacts that also will occur. So having this information will help the insurance Takaful operators to be able to identify and appropriately price and mitigate with regards to their risk arising. So not having the data is something that is causing an impasse at this present moment, because when the insurance companies, and I will wait for Junaid to confirm this, insurance companies, when they look at underwriting modeling and they look at actuarial modeling, they rely on past data. However, climate change, as Junaid has said, is forward looking as well, because it's looking at modeling up to 2040, 2060, 2050, based on whether how fast we're going to achieve a 2.2 degree world and what are the impacts of a 2 degree world. So we lack that information, forward looking, and the now information to help guide with regards to the modeling that we will need with regards to risk assessment and also underwriting with regards to pricing of pricing of products and the structuring of products that need to happen. So data is very important in this case. And again, like approach number 3, I think we do need to have an industry get together and participation to discuss and to agree on what sort of data, how we're going to access the data, how are we going to ensure data robustness, and what can the various institutions in Malaysia or regulatory authorities in Malaysia, what can be done with regards to assist the sector in this case. And then thirdly, lastly, we've also had feedback from your customers, you could say, is that a lot of customers, your customers basically have no context, right? Financial institution, banks and all of that, and also the insurance sector have got no context in which, where and how the questionnaire is coming and why you need the data for. So outreach and education of your customers with regards to identifying the GPs, the 5 GPs that we have, then becomes very important. So you will find that the approach for GP1 and GP2, which is basically on a transactional basis, and also the risk and the data that you need to understand as you move forward and to be able to quantify and to be able to mitigate, you do need to be able to you'll find that it actually spreads across GP1, GP2, GP3, GP4, GP5. So this will be quite common as we go along. And it's also important to note that the information that it will be required here will also help drive with regards to product development and the development of newer climate adapted products as well. I think one of the things that has brought up very clearly this last flood situation is that the exposure of the Malaysian communities, particularly in the urban environment, with regards to insurance risks that they have. Number one, lack of insurance, not enough insurance products, and if they're adequately covered, the risk also to insurance companies, particularly on the product level side. So understanding where these risks are, identifying them, and being able to quantify and put it into your assessment processes is very important in this case. Junaid, anything you'd like to add?
Ojing, I just wanted to point out there's some questions that are emerging, but we'll try to answer them along the way. So one of the questions is, investments aside, how do the 5 GPs related to life insurance products? So I'll attempt to address this question shortly when we've concluded with the 5 GPs and we're talking about risk management and approaches that we can use internally to look at the implications of climate risk on your mortality side or your stress testing side as well. So just bear with us for a little while.
Yeah, I think the other 2 questions is talking about something that JC3 can take up with regards to consolidated database and also with regards to government, with regards to government bonds. Yeah, so we will address that later. So I will move on then to GP3. You have to note that GP3 and GP4 both relate to the organization, the body itself, the company itself. So let's say, for example, for life or for general insurance, you might be insuring an activity, right? So if you talk about a big construction company, they might have an activity to build something, and you sell life insurance and you sell or medical insurance, and you sell your other products related to general insurance to that activity. But in itself, GP3 and GP4 looks at the assessment of that company, parent company, Construction A, to see whether they fall into the do no significant harm to the environment, or they have actually looked at remedial measures to transition with regards to climate mitigation and all. So the assessments then will fall with regards to the practices that they have. Good, if you're talking about a construction company and relating it to carbon, design for the environment, low carbon products, low carbon design, energy efficiency buildings, energy efficient buildings, low embodied carbon products in the cement, in the glass, in the materials that they use, sustainable construction principles and applied as well across the supply chain. This then becomes part of your assessment during your insurance claim, insurance value chain, and also in your investment value chain. So you will see that basically when you evaluate the company under GP4 and GP3, you can take the same approach, except that under investment, you probably have a lot more companies that you might want to evaluate. But the same basic approach can be applied in this case because you are assessing the company in itself. So the processes that will be adopted will be what we talked about very much this morning with the banks and also generally to everybody is we must set a clear risk acceptance criteria. So what is your risk appetite with regards to companies that you're evaluating with regards to GP3 and GP4? So you need to be able to set what do you mean by no harm to the environment criteria for your industry in itself, for the insurance sector in itself, and for the Takaful sector in itself. For the Takaful sector, you are already guided very much by the principles, the Sharia principles. So in a sense, it's quite more clear cut for Takaful products and all. But for and also with regards to the VBI value-based intermediation and VBIT as well for Takaful sector. So it's quite clear. And so for the rest of the insurance sector, the choice then is whether you want to adopt the principles from the Takaful VBIT principles, which talks about the Sharia principles, looking at your risk acceptance and your risk criteria. That is one option. Or you can go the way of the international insurance companies, and I'm sure tonight we'll be able to share some with us with regards to the governance structures, the risk appetite, and that's what he said earlier already. So then you will be able to evaluate the next step, which is looking at the monitoring of activities, and the monitoring activities should in essence be risk-based. So the level of risk that you have derived for the company needs to then be monitored with regards to the activities that they are undergoing. So the construction company that you have, looking at what they monitor, what they measure, and how they mitigate the risk. For construction, is actually quite cut and dry, except for climate change, because they're very heavily regulated with regards to responsibilities and with regards to legal requirements. The only drawback is that in Malaysia, we still don't have climate legislation at the moment, but this is something that can be easily inbuilt into your risk criteria as well. Then approach number 3 will be to embed the assessment portfolio into the transitioning of climate change supporting strategy in C1, and then in conducting your due diligence and your due diligence assessment criteria. So basically, what it means is that you need to monitor that. Let's say, for example, construction company says that I'm doing sustainable construction strategy. With that, I start off first by changing all my fuel burning equipment, my generators, and all of that, which are traditionally known to create a lot of CO2 emission, to energy efficient and to low noise, and also the fact that the lorries that they use within the construction site will be how do you say, low carbon, and will practice safe activities with regards to because in construction site we're very used to what we call ghost lorries, because they don't have license plates. So because they only operate within the construction site, they don't need to go out on the road, so they're known as ghost lorries. So how to make sure that all those lorries work safely for the safety of the contractors and for the workers, as well as reduce carbon emissions, all that needs to be put in place, right? So that could be your first plan. Then the second plan could be looking at design, looking at the products that you buy. So you need to be able to monitor to make sure that all of these are put in place, so that you are able to say that yes, this company is either doing no harm to the environment, or has already moved towards transitioning with the implementation of the plan. Then the next one is to be able to identify environmentally friendly activities that we've already used the word green, and the acceptability of the word green. If we were to use the analogy of the construction industry, I would say that it's with regards to as Ramsey said this morning, with regards to compliance or adherence to guiding principle 1, 2, 3, 4, with regards to the adaptation and the adoption of mitigation or adaptation activities that you have. So rather than looking in terms of green, you look in terms of how far they've progressed with regards to the climate adaptation or the climate mitigation in that sense. And it could be things like waste reduction. Construction industry, given that example again, is very prevalent for creating a lot of waste, and waste that are actually recyclable. So looking at how recyclable that waste and how is that being recycled and how is that being reduced is one way of looking at identifying environmentally friendly activities. Right. Then lastly, when you have with GP3 and GP4, one do no harm and the other one transitioning, when you have confidence in the fact that as I'm speaking now as the construction company, if I as the construction company have confidence in the fact that my plan, my transition plan, my roadmap has taken me from do no harm to transitioning, and I'm confident of the data, the robustness of my system and all, I will tend to get that assured. So as an insurance company or bank as well, what we discussed this morning, you can talk to external assurers to get the greenhouse gas data, the processes that you have in place assured, and this will give additional confidence to financial institutions, to your investors as well, in in the fact that your programs and the plans that you have implemented, how do you say, showing performance as per what you stated with regards to the objective that you have in the beginning when you talk about do no harm or transitioning in this case. So I think I've covered with regards to remedial measures in terms of transition. Similarly, the only thing is with regards to remedial measures and transition is that for the investments that you're doing, you have to start looking at due diligence either through your fund managers, a collaboration with your fund managers, or doing it yourself with regards to the performance of your target investees with regards to transitioning from do no harm to transitioning to energy reduction. So let's say, for example, you invest you have invested in one of our a utility provider who's now dependent on coal, but their plan is to transition to low carbon new technology, whatever form that may be, and they have shown a progress with regards to that. That will be part of your due diligence process. It could be on site, it could be through questionnaire, it could be through forecasting as well with regards to where you see their data. They might also do modeling as well. So for those of you who are involved with investor relations, you will be very familiar with the fact that a lot of your investors are already sending out questionnaires to you. You will also be very familiar that a lot of your investors will also not hesitate back in the day before COVID to come and visit you, to look at your processes and to look at your systems that you have in place. So this is very much part and parcel of what you have to think about doing with regards to ensuring that the target investees that you have remain on the path of GP3 and GP4. Anything you'd like to add, Junaid?
I just wanted to add, there's a lot of questions again coming in, and I'm trying to read them and see if we can address them along the way. There's one question on expertise. I was wondering if you have an answer to this. Insurance companies typically do not have the expertise to evaluate or assess whether the insurer in line with the sustainability agenda. So do you have any recommendations to address this lack of expertise?
Actually, it's not the lack of expertise. It's the fact that when you, like I said, like this morning, the response to the bank, when it comes to credit risk assessment, you know, they were talking about needing to hire forestry expert, construction expert and all. But actually, if you set up your evaluation criteria right, if you look at GP1 and GP2, if you set up your evaluation criteria right, if you embed and you already have identified what your risk appetite is, and you embed it into your evaluation criteria, for investments, it's probably easier to do. For insurance companies, for products, it's probably harder to do because you've never actually thought about what sort of clients do I need to engage with, right? Can I engage with to fulfill this criteria? For the international agencies, in the insurance agencies, it's probably easier because Global has probably done something about it already. For the smaller Malaysian companies, this is something that you need to learn. And you need to establish with regards to what sort of questions that you need to ask with regards to your general insurance and with regards to the life insurance that you have. So these are things that if you set up the criteria right, and you can actually have a panel, or you can appeal to JC3 for ideas on how to set up a panel and all. Right, then they will provide the expertise. Then you don't have to hire the expert. You have to train your agents. You have to train your underwriting team, and you have to train your product development team, of course, to think about what are your climate risks, what is the climate risk appetite that you have within the company, and how do you structure products necessarily to build resilience and to ensure the future continuity of your business. So once you set up that criteria, it should all flow together. And if you use the expert panel, however way that is being established, you might want to establish one for the insurance company by itself, and everybody shares its cost. These are just suggestions, right? And so from there, then everybody has a share and everybody has a say with regards to the use of the committee. I think that's probably the best way moving forward to basically share the burden of cost, and also share the burden of the perceived lack of capabilities within the insurance sector on ESG. So it's a matter of just shifting the thought pattern and understanding what you really need in the business.
Maybe I can also add here that the CCPT implementation group is working on some of these standardizations at an industry level. So we're trying to determine the best way forward to come up with a common classification system, for example, for investments. And we're talking to external providers who could perhaps help us with this as well. As I see, there's some questions related to the classification that was addressed earlier in the morning as well.
Yeah.
And the lack of data, as Wei Cheng also mentioned, JC3 is looking at it. There is a work stream that has consolidated data requirements across the industry and has put these together, and we're evaluating how we can bridge these data gaps between the optimal state and what's required immediately.
Yeah, there's a question here actually talking about creating a sustainable and green insurance product framework. Actually, you don't need to do that because the UN principles of sustainable insurance has already been released, and it's been released probably about 5 years ago, and it's been around for some time. Just like there is the UN Principles of Responsible Investment, there's the UN Principles of Sustainable Insurance, and you can actually take a lot of learnings from there with regards to products and with regards to pricing and with regards to risk assessment, and also with regards to, I mean, the UNPRI Principles of Responsible Investment should guide with regards to the investment concepts, principles that you have. But the UN Principles of Sustainable Insurance is something that is worth looking into, rather than reinvent the wheel. Of course, given the question number 2 here, proactively combat greenwashing. Yes, greenwashing is an issue, and I think JC3 Bursa is also sitting in the JC3, right, Junai? Yeah. So I think this is something that they are probably aware of as well, with regards to the reporting requirements. Okay, if I may continue, we then talk about GP5, which is looking at the prohibited activities. And in essence, prohibited activities or GP5 should look at illegal or things that contravene legal requirements. I do agree with Ramsey in the sense that, in essence, this should already be part and parcel of your risk assessment process, because under the enterprise risk assessment process, legal compliance is a prime requirement. So in essence, this already would be the easiest thing for you to fulfill, because this would have happened already. The only problem is when it comes to enterprise risk assessment for a lot of companies is the fact that your enterprise risk assessment process considers legal compliance from a governance perspective, from a business perspective, but very few actually, unless of course it is their business, like for example, construction and all that, very few actually consider environmental health safety legal requirements. So in essence, that area can be improved and will give you a better holistic view of what the legal issues are. Apart from the waste and all of that. The other thing that where we general companies are usually weak at is also the fact that they don't consider broader guiding principles relating to on a global scale, such as the human rights and all. And so for a lot of companies in Malaysia, that has never been captured, given the fact that we've only got labor laws. We have got 3 pieces of legislation that governs with regards to human rights, migrant worker and all of that. But the rest of the bigger principles with regards to human rights and with regards to the rights of the individual and all that, we generally don't tend to include it into our risk assessment process. So for the prohibited activities and for the proper evaluation of what companies should adhere to, and so as not to so as to be able to appropriately identify companies which are going to be of a risk to you, particularly with regards to legal compliance. The evaluation of legal compliance needs to be expanded to include environmental health, safety, and more with regards to the human rights principles that has been adopted globally. Now, Malaysia itself has signed 3 of the I think the declarations that we have under the ILO, and so you need to be guided by the sectors that you are dealing with. For example, very clear already under palm oil. Right, we've got RSPO, which is very clear with regards to the requirements. It's come out in the news with regards to custom and border requirements out of the US. Glove maker is also very clear already what are the international prevailing thoughts and views on labor management and migrant labor management around the world. So these are things that you can actually ask your target companies to provide the information if they are in that sector. Right. There was a question asked earlier about how do we determine the legal status of the companies? For Malaysia, actually, if you engage with the Department of Environment and you engage with the Department of Labor, saying that, asking whether these companies have got legal issues or not without going into details, they generally will be able to respond officially to say that, yes, there's a case or there's no case. So this generally does happen. You just have to know how to get that information as well. But when it comes to labor rights and all of that, it is still a bit touch and go because we have a lack of legislation in that case in Malaysia. Tonight?
Yes. Okay. So maybe, Ojeng, if we can go on to the next section, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Okay, so then after that, the question is, you know what the GPs 1 to 5 is, you also know what the sub-criteria is and how you need to assess them. What do you need to do to embed it into your business operations? So the way that we see this and the way that it needs to be managed is that there's two aspects to it. What do you do internally within your organization, and what do you do externally with regards to client-facing aspects? Right, for the banks, it's fairly easy in the sense that you do this through credit evaluation. For insurance companies, your client facing is basically through your products and through the evaluation of risk from the products arising. So the way that it is to be managed should not differ from your ESG strategic vision, because climate change, as we've discussed this morning, has got significant impact on social aspects. So all of that has to then be included into your integrated risk assessment process, looking at business and looking at ESG risk of vis-a-vis bracket non-financial risk, and they have to be established and they have to be understood with regards to where are your risks arising from ESG, from climate change, relating to the aspect of ESG. Number one, they have to be prioritized, and then you have to understand what your risk appetite is, and leading to your governance side, how you want to govern and how you want to manage this risk. This, in essence, should be integrated with your enterprise risk assessment process and reported to your board risk committee on a regular basis, which you do anyway, but you just need to expand in terms of details with regards to ESG and climate. Right? KPMG did a study last year, where we evaluated the top 200 companies on the Bursa, and only 4% reported with regards to climate and climate mitigation. So that's not very good with regards to progress. So these are things that companies need to start, financial institutions need to start thinking about what you require of your target companies and your for your clients, basically for the insurance sector that you're insuring on a corporate basis. What do you require them to report to you? How do you want to govern this from a board level to a senior management level and to the managers level? What sort of information do you require from your clients, right? Then the next part is looking at roles and responsibility, looking at the business operating model, which we'll go a little bit too in detail, and what sort of supporting functions that is needed to support this. So the first one, we will drill down with regards to the strategic vision, the governance and roles and responsibilities, and I call upon Junaid because I think you have lots of experience here. Junaid?
Thanks, Ojeng. So maybe before I go into an example of what AIA Group is doing, I see there's a question that says, do the careful insurance companies need to establish board-approved company framework and policy on sustainability, ESG, climate, or is it sufficient to only set the direction, implement initiatives, disclosures, and reporting such as sustainability or climate report? I think the short answer to this is it depends, right? So to me, without a framework in place, it would be very difficult to understand all the different moving parts that are involved in the pyramid that Ojeng just showed you. So you need a strategic vision, you need a framework for governance, you need to assign roles and responsibilities and authorities, and the best way to put all of these together is, as you mentioned, in a framework that is ideally board approved, so that the board understands their responsibility, the senior management understands their responsibility, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in terms of just sharing an example on these areas for AIA Group, at the group level, we have an ESG committee which oversees the development of the ESG strategy. And then it also monitors performance against our ESG metrics and the various initiatives that are taken by the company. This structure can be replicated across the different countries, again, depending on their readiness to do so. The committee, the ESG committee, comprises of members of our group executive committee, as well as some directors of the board as well. This committee is primarily responsible for updating our board on ESG matters and updates on material issues. So material issues could cover, things such as incidents related to environmental events or social events or governance-related events as well. I should also point out at this point, though, that ESG risks are also discussed and escalated to our board members through the risk committee. A model that some companies may choose to have is to embed these climate risk updates or ESG updates within their board risk management committee meetings. Some companies may choose to have a standing agenda to carve out all the climate related matters into a separate agenda item, just to bring up and highlight climate and sustainability related issues if there are any. So at AI, of course, a comprehensive approach to our risk management also ensures that we have the right frameworks in place across our business, and this allows us to address relevant risks, including climate risk. I'll share more on this shortly in the next slide. Oichen, can I pass back to you? Yeah.
Thanks, Junaid. Okay, the next session that we're going to look at is with regards to risk and product management, product offerings, risk management and product offerings. And you do need to evaluate this on two aspects. One is with regards to the insurance in terms of your insurance value chain, and the other one is with regards to the investment value chain. But in doing both, the value of scenario analysis is very important. Because the scenario analysis is a risk management tool to basically allow you a forward view of where you see the risks and opportunities arising as you try and to envisage the world in two different scenarios, hence scenario analysis, obviously. Scenario analysis, one at a 2-degree world as subscribed by the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. But there are some companies who are able to evaluate, on their requirement at a 1.5-degree world, 2-degree world, or 1.5-degree world. So in essence, basically scenario analysis look at two criteria, a 2-degree world, or the worst case scenario, a 4-degree world. And then it allows you a forward view with regards to when you see your goals are. So let's say, for example, KPMG has a goal to be net zero by 2050. So then we will then do the scenario analysis based on where we are now and where we see the world to be, whether we are, at a 2-degree world and a 4-degree world at a 2050 scenario. Then we try and map out where the risks are, and from there you'll be able to understand corporate trajectory, product trajectory, risk to the community over the time frame that you need to adjust and pivot with regards to your business to build resilience. From understanding the scenario analysis and then running it through your strategic risk assessment process and your product risk assessment process, you will be able to identify new products or modify products that are of higher risk to climate change, and you will be able to adjust with regards to underwriting and lower your risk with regards to claims, exposure, and things like that. So risk management in this case is very important, and the risk management has to consider for climate adaptation and for climate change, climate impact. A longer term scenario is no longer talking about what do I know and what will happen on a year-to-year basis, and it's also no longer talking about where will the community move with regards to wants and wish and as a society. This is talking about something which has been imposed on communities in Malaysia or the world because of our temperature rising, and we had a very good dose of that last year when during the floods. Nobody can control this. Nobody knew that it was going to be that severe in terms of severity. Hence, for insurance business, your risk is exposure with regards to claims. Thank God we do not suffer like the Philippines hurricanes and things like that. But these are things that you need to be able to anticipate in terms of your risk assessment process, and you need to be able to anticipate with regards to product development, claims reduction, claim exposure reduction, and the financial payout exposures that you potentially face. So risk needs to be addressed in that point of view, and not on the traditional point of view with regards to what's happening within my organization. Risk also arises from your agents with regards to risks of stranded assets, if they have offices in areas which are of risk to climate change. For the last 3 years, I've been attending my the webinars that I've been doing. There's been a projection done by the National Hydraulic Institute since 2015 that it's projected to flood all the way from Klang to Shah Alam. In a way, I'm very glad that the flood happened because it shows that it's happening already. And on the other hand, I'm also very, very saddened and very shocked by the fact that the scale of the troubles that we've been having. But for an insurance company, you need to know this information, and you need to be able to help your agents to mitigate this risk, because from a community and a social point of view, the impacts is probably 10 times more than what you're going to get from an environmental point of view. So these are things that you need to consider. And as well, during your investment and sourcing and the due diligence aspects that you need to do in terms of investment selection, to guide your investment selections, all this new information does need to come into place already. I'll give you a very good example. Plantation companies have been suffering over the last 5 years drought situations. And with drought situations, as our temperature rise, plants all perform to a minimum and maximum temperature range in which they're most productive in. So if they're going to suffer a double whammy of temperature changes, productivity will fall, and if they're going to suffer from drought situations, productivity will fall further. What is the value of your investments if you're investing in plantation companies then? Right? Or you're investing in bonds arising from plantation companies. So all of this evaluation does need to come into place, and portfolios need to be managed and balanced in that sense. Right? With that, you also need to think about monitoring and measurement and all. The other thing I like to raise is the fact that the reinsurance companies, a lot of the insurance companies depend on reinsurance companies. So reinsurance reports and the way that they evaluate climate risk does need to be brought up. The international ones, like for example, Swiss Re last year released a report on the status of ASEAN exposures towards climate change, and they evaluated 49 countries. Malaysia came up 47th. This is a Swiss Re report. And if you attended PM presentations, you will have that source. Because I think they invited Swiss Re to actually give a talk on that. But reinsurance business really need to start looking at the real impact of climate change on the products that they have. Junai?
Thanks, Wei-Ching. That was quite insightful. So maybe if I can just add some practical experience or just different approaches that we've seen across the world that can be actually used to see how the guiding principles can be applied to your business, or climate risk in general can be applied. So one of the most widely used approaches that I've come across is that firms choose to view climate risk as a transverse risk that manifests across your risk landscape. So what this means is, if you have a risk landscape divided into your operational, financial, et cetera, risks, you see climate risk as a vertical that cuts across all these other risks. What this means is that you don't view it in isolation, rather it becomes a lens with which to view your other risks. Having said that, there are some institutions, of course, that are looking at sustainability and climate risk as a standalone risk as well. But in either case, I think the practical sort of approach is not as straightforward as going to the business. For example, I see a lot of questions on how does it impact life, the life side or the product development side or agents or so on and so forth. So to engage business in a meaningful manner, one of the ways suggested is to devise a set of what's called climate risk drivers that can impact your particular type of business. So what this means is that if you look at the climate risk types, which are physical risks or things that are physical in nature, like extreme weather events, transition risks, or risks caused by the transition to a low carbon economy, or liability risks, you can develop drivers within each of these categories. So maybe if I can share some examples, just to make this a bit clearer. For physical risks, one such driver could be extreme weather events. For example, flooding, as Oicheng just mentioned a little while ago. A transition risk driver could be the cost of transition and dealing with this regulatory change that's taking us to a low carbon environment. A liability risk driver could be litigation or class action lawsuits. So once you develop these lists of drivers, you can use these drivers to engage with the business or the first line of defense, who are the risk owners, in determining how these risks will impact your business, be it product development or mortality or agents and so on. So for example, there was a question on the life side. When applying these risk drivers, an actuary, pricing actuary or valuations actuary might actually highlight that rising temperatures under a warming scenario could result in mortality deterioration. And I'll just share a bit more on this shortly. For an underwriter, extreme weather events might impact, your flood coverage products and how you underwrite for those. Or, flooding might impact your property management and the placement of your different branches across the country as well. So this exercise can also then be used to create a cluster or a heat map of the most relevant climate risk drivers to your entity. And by virtue of doing that, you will also be in a position to determine what are the best controls, the most relevant controls that need to be placed to mitigate these risks. Now, there are implications of this exercise on an institution's stress tests as well. There are a lot of technical approaches, and at the risk of being reductive, I will try to bring it down to very simple layman terms. There is evidence now emerging that under various scenarios for life insurers, since I've seen a couple of questions on life insurers, there is evidence now emerging that under different global warming scenarios, there will be mortality and morbidity deterioration. So if you're familiar with the RCPs, the RCPs are what's called the representative concentration pathways, and these are trajectories that are adopted by the Ipcc, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So the pathways describe different climate futures, all of which are considered actually possible, depending on the volume of greenhouse gases that are emitted in the years to come. So some of the research is now showing that under the worst case scenario, which is RCP 8.5, climate-related changes could actually cause deterioration in mortality by up to 12 to 13% by the end of the century, which is by 2100. And this will come primarily from a worsening of cardiovascular diseases, which may rise as global temperatures rise as well. And in addition to that, vector-borne diseases are expected to rise as well. If you shrink this scenario down a little bit, the same sort of research shows that for the relatively shorter term, which is up to 2050 to 2059, the deterioration in mortality would be about 2 to 3%. And then in the better case scenarios, it would still be about 1%. So one thing to ask, perhaps from research like this or applying these climate risk drivers to your actuaries or to your reinsurers is, do we need to start incorporating mortality deterioration under our product pricing or our stress tests or our valuations, for example. Now, similar to this, transitioning to a low carbon economy can also result in mid to long-term volatility in markets. So as we move towards a net zero sort of environment, what will the impact be on our bond prices, on our sukuks, on our equity markets? As some of you have alluded to in the chat, often what we find for life insurers and Takaful is that the primary exposure to climate risk, a majority of it, is on the asset side. And then, some distant second is, of course, things like mortality, morbidity for life insurers, or climate-related events for GI insurers, and of course, the element of reputational risk or litigation risk as well. So yeah, these are just some of the practical examples on the insurance side where we can look at climate risk with climate risk drivers. So Oiching, back to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Junai. Very interesting statistics, something that we should take note of, and hoping as we move forward that we will not reach 8.5 or 8-degree world. That would be, I think, disastrous for us all. Okay, just to clarify a little bit, did they do any projections if we go between 3 to 4-degree world? Was there any data supplied for that?
So the RCP 8.5 is actually a greenhouse gas concentration. It doesn't mean 8 degrees. It translates roughly to 3 to 4 degrees, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so there's a stratification by the different Ipcc scenarios. So there's 8.5, 6.1, 4.5, and then they correspond to 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, and 4 degrees, if I recall correctly. And yes, so we still see mortality deterioration with rising temperatures, if we're talking specifically about mortality. And then, of course, there's other widely publicly available scenarios that are available. For example, the Bank of England scenarios that show impacts on our financial markets as well.
Correct. Correct. Okay, thanks, Junai. So moving forward, the main thing to remember is when we do risk assessment, when we look at governance structures and all, it should be upon the back and together with your ESG management, and grafted upon that will be, or rather, it should be grafted upon your enterprise risk assessment so that you are able to do a holistic evaluation with regards to risk. And the other thing that you also need to remember is that one of the key things of doing this is eventually it will lead to disclosure. So reporting disclosures, and as Bank Negara has already indicated, eventually we will go towards the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. BERSA over the last 3 years have been educating a lot of boards already with regards to these requirements. And as I've stated earlier, the ISSB, International Sustainability Standards Board, which is formed from the IFRS Foundation, has already released 3 sets of draft documents with regards to how companies should report on their financial exposures arising from climate change, aligned with the TCFD requirement, and as well as financial exposures arising from ESG management and ESG programs that we have. So finance and legal and tax does need to get involved. So it is not a one department or looking in primarily at actuarial or looking at primarily at investment. It involves the whole company as a whole, finance, legal, accounting, tax, as well as the comms people. And most importantly, what we have also recognized is there is a lack of awareness as to what ESG is. There is a lack of awareness with regards to impact of climate change and whether climate change actually impacts us in Malaysia. And so capacity building and understanding why is it important for financial institutions, in fact, all institutions in Malaysia to start looking at climate risk as a real risk with regards to our business resilience is important. So training, talent acquisition, and looking at the best mix for your organization and performance assessment all need to be upgraded and expanded to include ESG as well. And we also need to be able to utilize technology and with regards to the use of software applications, data collection, analytics especially, to help to cope with the fast-moving world of data generation and data tracking. I believe, Junai, AIA has got some programs in place, right?
Sure. Thanks, Oiching. So, apart from the examples shared by Oiching, I think there's obvious implications of technology usage to enable you to actually reduce your carbon footprint by, digitalizing your processes, using less paper, for example. But there is a trade-off. Of course, your energy consumption rises, but it's up to the institution to evaluate, what the trade-off is. Another application that I can think of that's used by some institutions is that technology is actually really aiding the process of physical risk assessment. And it's really interesting. So there's widely available tools And one that I can think of is this tool called EasyXDI. So what this tool does is it allows you to look at your institution's premises, and with geolocation data and some assumptions on the year in which your building was created, for example, what sort of materials would have gone into construction and so on, the tool can actually take geographical factors such as proximity to rivers, the type of soil in that area, the projection for that particular area in terms of global warming. And again, under the RCP scenarios, it can actually break down the vulnerability of your building or your branch to deterioration in structure up to the end of the century. So you can actually stratify the hazards again by flooding, by wind damage, heat, and soil movement as well. And these tools also, produce a value at risk for those of you familiar with the concept. So, they will give you a value at risk under the worst case scenario of RCP 8.5 again, which can give you some sense of what point, if any, your building might actually become uninsurable because there'll be so much damage caused by climate change. But of course, the idea is not to scare us into vacating these buildings. The idea is to be able to understand in a nuanced sort of manner on what physical risks present themselves to our assets, which might be our buildings or our branches as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Junaid. Okay, moving forward, as we are quite lucky in the sense that actually technology and the thinking and understanding with regards to ESG requirements has expanded over the years, and we are not quite where we were. And I think in Malaysia, we've made tremendous progress with regards to understanding the ESG requirements. So moving forward with regards to what companies can do in assessing economic activities, there's been a study that was done by looking at financial, non-financial undertaking turnover derived from products or services associated with economic activities that qualify as environmentally sustainable. And this is looking at measuring insurers or reinsurers underwriting exposures with regards to taxonomic activities. And this is also derived primarily from looking at the EU taxonomy, because if you look at around the world, the most matured there is actually that we can derive case studies and learning from is from the EU taxonomy and the research. So when it comes to exposures and when it comes to provisions for the insurance sector, we as Junaid has said, liabilities is very important. Liabilities in terms of claims incurred as well, and net of reinsurance are things that does need to be considered. And life insurance technical provisions should also include obligations towards policyholders in relation to the savings element, because of the way that the products are being structured now. So that sort of things needs to be considered, when we talk about life insurance and considerations of climate impact arising. So when products change, situations change, all of that needs to be rebuilt into and refactored into your underwriting modeling with regards to the products and the types of products that you facilities that you're providing with your products. Anything to add here, Junaid?
No, nothing here. Maybe we can move on.
Okay. All right. So then moving forward is the indicators that are most relevant for the insurance sector. And in this case, reinsurance does have to start looking at this is with regards to the KPI for sustainable investments, which is number one, the ratio or proportion of insurer or reinsurers investments in relation to total investments that are directed at funding or are associated with economic activities that qualify as environmentally sustainable. These are key indicators that the insurance sector can review with regards to its investments, sustainable investments. And the other one is looking at underwriting, sustainable underwriting activities with regards to non-life gross premiums written. So the gross proportion of the non-life gross premiums written in relation to the total non-life gross premiums written So the non-life gross into relation to the total for climate, corresponding to insurance activities as identified as environmentally sustainable in the EU in taxonomy. So in terms of reporting requirements, these two are quite useful indicators that can be thought about in terms of what you want to report. Once the reporting mechanisms kick in from Bank Negara side. But I think at the present moment, we're just looking at the economic exposures that you have. And you need to follow that reporting requirement. So this is just further details with regards to KPIs provided with regards to the sustainable investments. And so you can actually look at what sort of indicators and what sort of mechanisms that you can put in place. The first one is looking at direct investments and indirect investments as per what we've been talking. And then the percentage of total investments and in absolute monetary terms, in terms of the investments that you have that are related to environmentally sustainable products. And the other one is looking at unit-linked or index-linked portfolios with coverage of the ratio with reference to balance sheet total. So I will leave this with regards to further information for your consumption. Because we do have a few more slides that we need to go into. We've also got the sustainable underwriting activities. So gross premiums, as per what we said, revenue from insurance contracts issued or insurance revenue, depending on the applicable accounting framework that you're using. Bearing in mind, of course, what I said earlier with regards to TCFD reporting requirements, if you have Singapore-based companies or branches, you will also know that Monetary Authority of Singapore has already instructed financial institutions in Singapore to start reporting on the TCFD. So these are things that you already have to start monitoring and tracking upon. So you might as well do it for everybody across the group rather than wait for one branch to do it. It doesn't make sense for, if you're all the same branch, to one branch go ahead and then the others play catch up. It doesn't make sense because we are all under the same pressure when it comes to climate reporting at the present moment. Whether it's milder in the form of Bank Negara or full front as in the mass approach that has been taken. Whatever it is, it's all coming already. So we do have to start looking at what is happening with regards to our accounting framework. So you might as well start make a start of it doing that. Then the other thing that is important, apart from the ratio being depicted, the criteria of different environmental objectives and how you want to disclose it, and then looking at supplementary disclosures that may be important with regards to the application of the GP1 to GP5, and also whether you use proxies or not, especially with regards to accounting programs. Accounting mechanisms that you have, accounting frameworks that you have in quantifying your financial exposure. So these are things that for insurance is of particular importance because historically we've seen the impact of physical risk from hurricanes, from storms and all of that. And I think anybody knows what's the projected figure from our insurance damage from our last the floods in December? Severe economic running in billions, I think, yeah? For Selangor? Junaid, do you have any idea what the number is?
I don't know the actual figure, no.
Yeah, have you heard anything what the number is going to be? None. Okay, whatever it is, all sectors who are involved, the banks, the insurance companies, there will be payouts that will be required. So these things have to be factored into your book so that you can actually prepare and understand what sort of risk exposures that you have. So it's actually important to look at the sustainable underwriting activities and what sort of key indicators that you like to keep track of so that you are able to monitor and track in this regard. Okay, so we'll go into case studies now.
Maybe on KPIs, I can just share something. So from an AIA group point of view, I think the highest level target that we've set just recently is that we've committed to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And of course, it has a trickle-down impact on other things as well. But in jargon-free terms, basically what it means is that the balance between the amount of greenhouse gas produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere should be net zero. So what this entails actually is that, for AIA Group, this is a commitment to the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is a global body that enables businesses to set ambitious emissions reduction targets in line with, some of the latest climate science, some of which I've mentioned just earlier. And what it means is that the targets will then be aligned with the United Nations Paris Climate Change Agreement, which aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees centigrade, and actually aims to limit warming to about 1.5 degrees. So of course, this is a commitment, or this target allows us to build a healthy environment in which we can support our purpose, which is, of course, to help people live healthier, longer, better lives. And I just want to link this to other sections that we mentioned also that, of course, there's additional governance built around such targets as well. So at the AIA Group level, we will have an AIA Group Climate and Net Zero Steering Committee that will report to the Chief Executive, and the targets will be tracked accordingly. Of course, it also helps to have an ESG strategy like the one we have, which is divided into 5 key pillars. And then within each of the pillars, you can set further targets or metrics or proof points that can be tracked by the company as well. Yeah, back to you, Arjun.
Thanks, Junai. We've only got 12 minutes left to look at case studies and also question and answers. I think what I'll do is just quickly run through the case studies. It's basically the same with the exception of looking at, in this case for the insurance sector, looking at the investment strategies that you have. And I think our participants can read through this. Unfortunately, with regards to the dealing of taxonomy from insurance sector, there has been far and few publications in between, with the exception of a few of the international firms. But talking about taxonomy, compliance, and all of that, particularly EU compliance, there has been not many companies that are reporting on this. What we will do as KPMG is once we get updated information or we find a new case study, we will forward it along to Junai and to Ramzi where applicable in this case. So to quickly run through the case studies in terms of disclosure is also standardized. If you've been around from this morning sessions talking about it in general and then looking at the bank case studies, this is how Axiona, with regards to reporting on the taxonomy requirements, have been doing it, and they do it in terms of revenue, EBITDA, CapEx, looking at the data that they have already verified. So financial audits will come in, greenhouse gas audits will come in, and then all of that has been related back to financial data. So going back to what I said earlier about the IFRS and all. So these are things that in terms of the data that the report is actually quite detailed. And for the EU taxonomy, is as Ramzi has stated earlier this morning, it's quite descriptive and it's very clear. It's very detailed with regards to the sectors that you have to report on and the activities that you have to report on. In the Bank Negara one, is not quite that prescriptive. There is avenue for flexibility in terms of reporting, and so industry engagement across the board for insurance and for banks. I think in terms of dialogue and discussion with regards to what you want to disclose, how you want to disclose, an agreement with Bank Negara, I think is also useful. If they've already said with regards to what you need to report, but how you want to report it, I think that needs to be engaged with Bank Negara. So it's useful. So participants here should think about engaging with the CCPT, the JC3 committee, to get further information and also basically to arrive at standardized agreements on how you want to do this. If not, it's going to be quite messy with regards to the level of reporting. So the other thing that you can consider in terms of reporting, what you do with GP1, GP2 as a transactional basis, and then GP4, GP5, GP3, GP4 with regards to a business basis, and then what you do with GP5. So these are flow diagrams that you can actually as they say, picture paints 1,000 words, and that's most important. The third thing, the lastly thing is when you do a reporting, you will reach a stage where you are mature enough to get the data and confident enough to get the data assured. It is always a good a step to take because it builds a lot of confidence within your organization on how your external stakeholders view you, your future investors, your current investors, regulators view you as well. So with that, I will move into the question and answer session. Junai?
Yes, so we can go to the questions now. Maybe I can just read them out. So the first one is a suggestion that can the working committee create a sustainable and green insurance product framework so we can clearly define what can be labeled as sustainable and green, and then proactively combat greenwashing. So this is a good suggestion. Thank you very much. I'd like to share that the CCPT implementation group is considering standardization, as you've suggested. So on the GI side, what one of the things that we're looking at right now is that for motor cover, there's no standard definition of green vehicles. So we're tying up with or in talks with ISM, who have a very comprehensive database of all sorts of car types, engine types, the kind of fuel that they consume, and the CCPT-IG will work towards creating a definition for green for vehicles there. But it is a good idea to consider, applying the same idea to a product framework, and this is something that we can bring back to the IG for discussion as well.
Related to that, Junai, there is a comment as well on the ASEAN application with regards to the sustainable and green insurance product framework, looking at ASEAN basis. I think it's good for the participants to actually bring further details to that. Yeah. There's one question that I would like to answer. There's a question here, which is basically, how can we establish a structural relationship between CCPT methodology E with the FTSE for Good ESG score? Can we? Yes, we definitely can, because as of last year, middle of last year, beginning last year, FTSE for Good has actually amended their questionnaire, the way that they evaluate ESG to include broader information with regards to climate change. So in a sense, the E aspect of ESG for FTSE for Good has already included all these things, all these reporting requirements with regards to climate change, and it's talking more now of climate mitigation and climate efforts and the journey towards net zero. So in a sense, FTSE itself has realized and has aligned. So I hope that answers your question. Going back, Junai, any other question that you'd like to deal with? We've only got 4 minutes.
So since we were talking about net zero, I think there's a question by Tony at the end. Is there a timeline to all of this? Is 2050 too late for some companies to achieve net zero? So this is a great question, but of course I leave it to the companies to determine what late and early is. I mean, no one's stopping the companies from being as ambitious as possible, but of course, it's one thing to make a commitment and it's another to deliver on that commitment as well. So of course, once you make a commitment, it needs to be carefully evaluated exactly what net zero means for the company. And that's why I mentioned the Science Based Targets Initiative, because it slices and dices that commitment down into goals that you need to accomplish, and there's governance built around it, that every few years there's a check-in on whether you're achieving those goals or not. So if companies can be more ambitious, then yeah, that's even better. Oiching, anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I think you said it all. The only thing is that, there is no set target. Most companies are quite comfortable with 2050. If you can achieve it earlier, of course, the companies that we work with here in Malaysia are now in the process of running all the different models, financial models in relation to the technical investments that they have to make in technology, and looking at where the progress with regards to the various technological options there is. Sometimes there is none. So you have to be judicious as to where your net zero goals are leading you. So before you make a commitment, sometimes it's a good idea to do a broad overview with regards to the study, the technology, the finance, the investment, and where that path is taking you before you actually commit. So don't commit until you know where you're going to go, in other words. Right. The next question, I think I'm going for bottom up tonight. What if customers are not cooperating and willing to disclose or share information for CCPT? Should ITOs just decline the business or perform desktop high-level assessments, evaluation in order to accept such business cases? Thank you. Junaid, you want to take that?
Sorry, Oicheng, can you repeat the question?
Okay.
Can you point me to which one it is? Right at the bottom?
It's 309 from the bottom up. Oh, is the next question? Sorry, it's from the bottom up. Second question from the bottom up.
What
so
if customers
basically,
are not cooperating?
yeah.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, basically, you start refusing businesses, or you work with them. I think that's the scenario.
So this again goes back to the risk appetite and you know how you want to deal with such clients as well. I mean, depends on how willing or not willing you are to undertake this. Unfortunately, there's no binary response to this particular question. Yeah. Would you agree, Oicheng?
Yeah, very much so. It depends. Some companies, I mean, it also depends on the relationship that you had with them. If it's a very long-term relationship and they're actually valuable business and they don't understand what you're doing, and then it's common business sense. I mean, it's just common sense to say that let us engage, let us help you to move you up the bar so that you meet our requirements because you are a valued customer. And I think these things, ongoing conversations happen all the time. We are certainly not in any position, anyone of us, as we do post-COVID recovery, to say that I don't want to do your business or be that selective, because in the end of the day, then, you know, as we say in sustainable supply chain, if you don't want to work with all your suppliers, in the end of the day, you have no suppliers. So it's a matter of engaging and moving them up the value chain or the understanding chain so that you actually are able to retain and continue that relationship, which I think is important.
Okay, maybe just given that there's, well, it's time now, I'll just pass back to Shirley, and I'll give you the assurance that we'll attempt to answer these questions, you know, at a later point. We'll try and consolidate them and respond, you know, in the best way that we can.
The email.
Yes, so thank you, Oicheng and Junaid, for the insightful session. As mentioned by Junaid, we will ensure that these questions are answered and it will be communicated accordingly. With that, we have come to the end of the training session. Please do take the time to answer the survey questions at the end. Thank you to our presenters and to our participants. Thank you again for participating and have a good day. Thank you.
Last word. The email the email for correspondence is ccptig@banknegara.com, bnm.gov.my. If you want to communicate with the committee, and I hope everybody does, because I think today's session, morning and afternoon, has raised a lot of issues with regards to standardization. So I hope everybody is able to participate in the IG. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.